Okay, and with me today, we've got Master Melody Johnson. Thank you so much for coming on the pod today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, I'm doing that typical British thing. I can see there it is beautiful sunshine, which is really nice. We've got a really dreary day. But how have things been over where you are in terms of COVID and in and out of lockdown? Because here we're actually staring down the barrel of a third or fourth potentially light lockdown with the winter season coming and the R numbers rising.
Oh, we just got out of our, I guess the COVID alert from the Delta variant. It peaked in August, and the Florida Hospital Association just announced on Friday that we're back down to the pre-Delta variant numbers, which is a less than a 3% infection rate. So my son, who goes to a private school here, they were in mandatory mask policy up until yesterday. So yesterday
Ah,
was the first day that my son actually went to school, and he's in first grade now. So we had kindergarten and first grade without a mask. So it was
fabulous.
a very exciting day for him yesterday and today to be able to see his friends' faces and his teacher's face and everything. So
Nice. Oh, that sounds wonderful. It's good that things seem to be going in the right direction over there, which is fab. Absolutely fabulous. Now, obviously, I've been following your career for a number of years now. We first met in 2016. And it was a small seminar here in the UK. It was an equally dreary day. But for those people who may not know you, um, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history, how you got into martial arts, and how skills became a thing. Because it's wonderful and it's huge.
Well, I'll try to give you the shortest version possible. But when I was younger, growing up in New Orleans, I it was in the '80s, and it wasn't the most positive environment in this growing up in the city. Even though I went to an all girls Catholic school, I was bullied a lot, and believe it or not, I was very small for my age, and that's why I was bullied. Is in fifth grade, my nickname was the kindergartner, and so I would retaliate with shenanigans to try to win people over or just get back at them. And my parents forced me into martial arts to help me develop discipline. So it wasn't like I saw the Karate Kid and said, yes, I want to do martial arts. I actually disliked it a lot when I first started. And my big brother decided to join with me just so that I had somebody to train with. But this is going back in the '80s when we had the dungeon dojo days where kids and adults trained together. I was always put in knuckle push-up position or dead cockroach position. It was hardwood floors. We didn't have the cool mats. And I'm not kidding you. My instructor's name was Mr. Slaughter,
Yeah.
and he was an ex-Marine.
Oh, wow.
And so he was very, very strict. So I did not like it. And we ended up having another teenager in our class. I was 11 when I started, by the way. And this teenager bullied my brother and I a lot during class. He was kind of like the Johnny of the old Johnny from the
The
Karate
old
Kid.
Johnny
Not
from the
the new
Karate Kid.
Johnny's
Yeah.
kind of he's kind of cool these days. And he bullied us a lot in class. And the first day that we had to spar, he wiped the floor with my brother, and then I got up to spar him. And the story is so vivid in my head, and then we're going back 30 something years ago. But the first time my instructor said go, he kicked me in the stomach. I fell to my knees. I was about to cry, but my mother, who always sat on the benches with her arms folded, looking at me, telling me to sit straight, and always fussing at me because I wasn't doing anything right in class. I looked over at her. You could see it in her eyes. She's like, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." So I got up, and my instructor said go, and I just threw this awesome kick, hit him in the head, spun his headgear, and I was like, "Oh, I'm in trouble." So I look over at my mom, and my mom, who's usually standing there mad at me for doing something, jumps up and goes, "Yeah!" and cheers for me. And then my instructor goes, 2 points kick to the head. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Not only do I get to kick boys in the head here, but I get points and my mom's happy for me. This is the coolest sport ever. So I fell in love with the martial arts after that. And I did a lot of competitions and did very well, even with boys and girls. And the cool part was because I'm very petite. So now I'm 45, but I'm 5 foot nothing, 103 pounds. So you can imagine we would be put in competitive groups based on age, not by size. So it was really neat. If I won, everybody's like, that little girl won. This is really cool. And if I lost, they're like, oh, the poor little girl lost. So I really built this cute identity in my tournament career, and people really started to take notice on who I was. So then I stopped doing martial arts through high school because back then it wasn't cool. But I got my first job as working at Disney World, and I can't say what I did, but let's just say I was really good friends with Mickey Mouse.
Hey.
And I worked in Magic Kingdom Entertainment, and it was really neat because I learned a lot about working with children, and I didn't really like kids before that because I was always bullied by them. So this is where I fell in love with children. And then I happened to land a job as a choreographer for the Mickey Mouse Club. And they heard that I was a black belt and wanted me to teach them some martial arts and their choreography. But I wasn't doing martial arts. So I jumped back into it. And then Mickey Mouse Club got canceled, which was unfortunate in some ways. But also in another way, my instructor was like, well, you can get a job here teaching if you want to help out in the kids class. So I said, sure, why not? And I taught a class. And I tell you what, it's a humble brag, but it was one of the greatest classes ever because I was able to integrate what I learned at Disney and entertainment with martial arts, and all the kids loved it. And I knew I was onto something. So that's really where I fell in love with children and teaching children. But through the years, as I grew my own martial arts schools, and I had four. We had a very successful $1 million operation in the 90s. I was 25 years old, a Jiu-Jitsu world champion. We had lots of world champions as well in our organization. I was getting burnt out from all the roller coaster classes of trying to make the classes dynamic enough for the older kids, but then the younger kids couldn't keep up. So then we kind of watered down the drills, and so the little kids can keep up, but then the older kids were losing interest, and the roller coaster classes just really started to frustrate me. So I started studying science and psychology, and that's where I started realizing that we were getting it wrong back in the 90s when we were teaching children. We were trying to teach them traditional martial arts curriculum that was written for, a young male adult in the military. And then the kids couldn't learn it and couldn't keep up with it, except for people like me. But I was an anomaly in the martial arts, right? And that's the problem with our industry at the time, is that we set our bar of expectations to the anomalies in class. And then the younger kids couldn't keep up. So they were dropping out right and left. And that's where I was getting that burnout. So that's when I started really realizing that maybe we should break it down, and instead of trying to teach martial arts to children and help them develop skills, can we do the opposite? Can we teach them skills that are appropriate for their age, and then plug in martial arts and incorporate the edutainment in it, the game-based learning, the play-based learning? And that's essentially how Skills was founded. So I walked away from my four schools shortly thereafter and moved to St. Petersburg and worked for a consulting company that was in the martial arts industry. And I wrote a children's program called Little Ninjas back in the late 90s. And it became a global phenomenon. It was in 2,000 schools within 2 years. And that's when my career started taking off in the combination of not only working with children in my own facility, my own studio, but also writing curriculum for other martial arts school owners and instructors.
Wow, that's a heck of a story. I'm sure you've told that many, many times. Thank you so much
Many
for sharing.
times.
That's awesome.
That was the short. That was the edited version too.
Love it. Now, I know that we're going to come on to the psychology of teaching children later on, but something that is very apparent, or at least it has been to me over the last few years, is you're surrounding yourself with wonderful people, and I'm from a background, and many of us in the UK are from a background where we're trying to build teams and we're trying to delegate to an extent the work that we do so that we can replicate ourselves. And obviously you've gone one step, probably 10 steps further than that. So compared to back in the day and to now, how is it that you have gone about building this team around you? Because I'm looking at the executive team and the people that are constantly popping up on Facebook and Instagram and all over the place. And they are absolutely wonderful, but they've all seemed to have their own specialties. So how is it that you've gone about finding people to help you grow and to help your organization flourish overall? And what are the biggest mistakes that you may have made in the past?
Well, I think that's where it starts. I think it starts with being a good leader. And listen, growing up in the martial arts industry, it's very hard for us not to have an ego, right? So, we walk around with our black belts and everybody bows to us and calls us master. And we can give push-ups just because somebody picks their nose in class, right? Maybe that's a little bit too tongue in cheek, but
no, I think
right,
that's about right. I've been there.
And then, yeah. And when I first opened my school here in St. Petersburg, I hired a young male instructor to work side by side with me. But I always had this fear of, if he becomes better than me, then he's going to leave me and open up my own school. And I'm the only person who's ever thought that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And the problem is that my consulting career also took off at the same time. And one specific story that really, this is where it really hit me, is I went to Australia and did a tour of instructor seminars for 2 weeks. And I came back and I was asking the parents, how were classes while I was gone? And they're like, well, it was great. Andrew did good, but it's not the same when you're not here. And that's when it hit me that I was not creating an opportunity for Andrew to flourish when I was gone. So I reassessed the way that I was leading him and the way that I created my curriculums and so forth. And instead of me trying to teach the better classes, we made sure that we were teaching consistently in each class, so that when I started traveling, what started happening was parents went, wow, Andrew teaches just like you. And then Clayton coming up through the ranks. Then it was, wow, Clayton teaches just like Andrew. And then Hunter teaches just like Clayton. And we noticed this generational effect of being consistent with just our systems and our operating procedures. And also me trying to do the opposite and saying, I'm better than you, so you always want to work for me, is elevating Clayton up, elevating Andrew up, highlighting their skills, training them to be the best version of themselves possible, so that I can step away and work on the business, not in the business. And I got that from the book. If you haven't read it, I'm sure you have, because you look like you have a lot of books back there, unless those are DVDs.
Well, I was going to say, those on my right are DVDs, on the left as books. But yeah, you're right. All the business books are upstairs, and I keep asking you for recommendation.
Yes. So the book E-Myth by Michael Gerber, E-Myth Revisited, where he talks about working on your business, not in your business. And you want to make sure that your team can replace you so that you can continue to build opportunities for them. That's when it all started to click. And I was able to step away from my school when my son was born and spend 6 months with him. And our school was still growing. And one of the reasons why is because I didn't have that fear mindset of Andrew's going to leave me and open up his own school. I had this mindset of, let me keep giving him opportunities and building him up. And then I ended up selling the school to Andrew. So the same thing's happening now with Skills Worldwide. So we found, I've found a couple of really good skills school owners who are constantly contributing, or who were constantly contributing in our group, just because they were raving fans. And I reached out to them, and that's my chief operating officer, Mike Evans, and said, I want to hire you because you're doing so much to contribute. I think that there's room for growth in our company by bringing you on board and handling a lot of these questions that I see that you answer them a lot better than me, because you understand it from a school owner's perspective and not just a creator's perspective. And now it's to the point where Skills has grown to over 1,000 schools, and we're getting ready to split the company into 3 DBAs: Skills Connect, which is curriculum; Skills University, which is instructor training, which means you don't have to be part of the skills school to get the instructor training; and then Skills Tech, which we're going to create a new tech platform for all of our content and so forth. And I knew that I wasn't I don't know enough about technology to really be able to spearhead some of these projects. So I promoted Michael Evans, who used to work in technology, to become the COO of my company, to do all the things that I'm not good at. And it really led a pathway for his career, to the point right now where he comes to me and says, here are the things we're doing. And I look at it and go, good job. Looks like you're on a roll, as long as the numbers are great. So yeah, we are surrounded by a lot of good people. And it comes back to once you become a really good leader, instead of trying to put yourself above them, put yourself below them and try to lift them up as high as you can, so that they can take the helm and shine and have a good career path. And then you can step back and think of the bigger picture on what's next. That's why I can do Skills Tech, Skills U, and put the right people in the right seats without having to be on the bus driving and then trying to figure out everything simultaneously.
That makes a lot of sense, because I think a lot of people, either wittingly or unwittingly, are still stuck in that trap, in that cycle of, I need to be the best at this. And if you get stuck there, you're never going to be able to, not necessarily leave the position you're in, but you're never going to be able to grow beyond the position that you're in, because you haven't got people around you to help and to drive the company or business forward. I absolutely love that. And yeah, I know I keep an eye on what's going over on Skills, and the team is phenomenal, and they're always very personable. Everybody I've ever spoken to has been wonderful. So yeah,
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You created an amazing team. Now we're gonna go forward a little bit in terms of a little bit more about the psychology of children now. So the next thing that I'd like to ask is about motivation around children in relation to the pandemic that's just gone, or rather the lockdowns that have just gone, and everything we're still going through, because a lot of places in the world, UK being one of them, there are hotspots where things are still closing, still opening, and everything is in disarray. So the biggest thing that we tend to see at the moment is trying to keep young children and teens motivated to come back into class, because there's spikes in anxiety because they've been in isolation for so long. But also, parents are coming to us and asking how it is that we can help them motivate their children back. Now, we've had varying success on this front. Lots of children, as soon as the restrictions were lifted, they were straight back in. But we're seeing masses of numbers who don't want to return for one reason or another, and it's usually because they have a lot of anxiety surrounding what's happening. So how would you speak to essentially the rise in anxiety and ways that we can kind of go around helping our youngsters, A, back into class, and B, managing their anxieties?
Well, there's no one secret trick that's going to get everybody back into class, right? I think what it comes down to is the way that you cultivate your audience and your environment. And I don't actually work in a school anymore. I work with hundreds of schools, but I'll use On the Mat, which is my school that I sold to Andrew here in the area. One thing that they've done really well is created a safe space for relationships and comfort and confidence and positive feelings. So the minute they were able to reopen, they had a lot better success because the kids knew when they came back into the school that was going to be we call it one of your top threes. The top three places you spend all your time is at home, for kids at school, and then your martial arts facility. So you have to make sure that your team is constantly well trained and making your school feel like a safe space. So that leads back into the science part of understanding the difference between authoritative based training and influence based training. Authoritative type of instructors are people who, they believe in that bottom or that top down, where kids need to be threatened, coerced, or punished to follow directions, and it stimulates a lot of cortisol. And for example, I give the example of if a kid's not sitting still in class and you say, listen, Damien, if you don't sit still, you're going to get 10 push-ups. And all of a sudden cortisol, your body, your brain immediately, your hypothalamus releases cortisol and adrenaline, and it goes into a fight, flight, or freeze mindset, and that inhibits learning, and it doesn't stimulate feel good chemicals when it comes to sitting still. Where what we do is we do the opposite. We say, okay, let's see who can sit better, Damien or Johnny. When I say go, I want to see who can sit better. Ready, set, go. Boom. Whoa, Damien, look how great that was. Give me a high five. I love how you're sitting. Now you see how you're smiling. Now all of a sudden sitting still is associated with dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all these really good feelings. So pre-pandemic, kids remember that. And then coming back, they know that they're going to go to that facility where it's a safe space where they're going to feel really good. So I know it doesn't provide a solution for those who haven't been doing that, but you can start now by anybody who comes to your school studying the most positive teaching strategies that you can, that focus on teaching with the brain in mind. So going back to that, if you're threatening, you're coercing, you're punishing children in class, you're going to stimulate that cortisol, which is really bad for learning. It builds that anxiety. It builds that lack of confidence. Your brain is always in a fight, flight, or free state of mind, which is what's happening during the pandemic, right? There's a lot of stress. Everybody's afraid to get sick. Everybody's wearing masks. Parents are scared. Some parents have financial issues. There's all these worries. So right now, it's the analogy of, imagine you go in the forest and you see this bear. Immediately you get the chills, your body gets nervous, your brain goes, either fight this bear, freeze, or run. But that's what's going on in your brain, and it's scary. And that's, it's great for your body to do that if there's a bear, because then you can run really fast. But children are experiencing this bear showing up in their house, showing up at their school, showing up everywhere. It's metaphorical, but it's that they're always nervous and intimidated and scared of everything because they're limited in these positive experiences. And parents don't always do this mindfully. The ones who do are the ones who are having a lot of success. And coaches and teachers don't do this mindfully either a lot of times because they're distracted with their own stress and worries. So if you can be mindful and intentional, knowing that I need this child to have feel good experiences by stimulating chemicals such as dopamine. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical, So, like if you have a vacation coming up and every time you think about that vacation, or right now, Halloween, right? So here we're open. Last year, trick or treating was very, very risky and it was very limited to like your core circle. This year it's open. My son's, he's 6. He's going to be 7 next week. So he's got Halloween and his birthday and Christmas. He's got dopamine galore, happy chemicals. So his anxiety level was really low. So dopamine, oxytocin, very important, is the hug chemical, the snuggle chemical. So parents need to hug their kids more, need to laugh with their kids more, need to do more nurturing things. Parents, teachers, coaches need to do more high fives, fist bumps, cheering them on. I'm coaching my son's flag football team, by the way, right now, because last year's coach was a cortisol coach. So I wanted to be that happy coach. By the way, we're undefeated. We're the only team undefeated in our league right now because I'm coaching with that intention. Serotonin is the satisfaction chemical. So giving them constant goals that they can set and accomplish. And then endorphins is like the energy chemical, laughing, dancing, exercising, all of these things. If you can work with a child with teaching with the chemicals in their brain and mind, this is where you're going to get great success, not only getting kids back into your facility because they know when they come to your facility, it feels great, but also getting other kids to come too, because parents are saying, listen, my son, Johnny, he's taking class right now on the Matt Martial Arts. It is the best thing in the world for him. And I tell you what a great way to help him recover from all the pandemic stress is when he goes to that school, he's safe, he's happy, he loves it. And I recommend you do that as well. So it's not easy, but it has to be done with intent, but it works for all the schools that I've been working with. And like I said, we have over 1,000 schools in 27 countries. One of the reasons why skills thrived even during the pandemic was because we are constantly training our schools and training our teams how to focus on this primarily over side kicks, punches, and high blocks and all that stuff. All that stuff can come, but it's got to start with them feeling good first.
Love it. Because I think what a lot of people get caught up in is, and I'm talking like the old school kind of way of doing things, because like yourself, I come from a very old school background. They want people to first and foremost be a good martial artist, but we're here to develop people overall as opposed to just one very specific skill set. And this is why I love skills, and I appreciate talking to you, is because you come at it from a completely different perspective. As I'm sure people can already hear from what you've just said, is that you come at it from the mind and the whole, as opposed to the physicality in the body. That's almost, not quite, but almost secondary to what you're trying to do. And I think there are a lot of instructors out there listening to this who would benefit from going from that more positive aspect in terms of creating the martial arts dojo as a third space to be. I love that. I hadn't even crossed my mind. We're doing all sorts of things to re-engage the children at the moment, and that's absolutely fabulous. So thank you for that. This whole pod's been worth it just for that tip. That's wonderful. So I'm going to, again, move on now to the next little bit. I've got a series of questions from the listeners. Now, what I figured we'd do, because some of these are relatively generic, but they're all very, very good, is we're going to do this as a quick fire round. So I've got 4, I've set them up for you, and then we're just going to go through it, and then we can get onto some more nerdy stuff as well. So this first one's going to have a tiny bit of an introduction. This is from Chris Jones, who said that I could use his name, and he's from Kickback with Chris Martial Arts Podcast, and he gave me a massive shout out, so I've got to repay him the favor. So Chris, if you're listening, massive thank you, sir. So question number 1, working with children can spring surprises when you least expect it. Do you recall any moments where a child has left you thinking, wow, with positive words of wisdom of their own? Because we know these youngsters can really come out with some awesome stuff.
Yeah, there's running through my head on positive words of wisdom. There's one particular one, and it wasn't necessarily words of wisdom, but it was what sticks with kids more than what doesn't stick. And it was one of those full moon days. And if you don't believe that full moons make kids crazy, you should buy a moon calendar and then watch what happens. It was last week or the week before with the full moon. Coaching my flag football team, the kids were nuts. It was full moon, that's why. Anyway, the kids were nuts this day, and the parents were looking at the kids in class. This was my 5 and 6-year-old class, and the parents felt bad for me. As a matter of fact, I believe one of the parents went in the store and bought me a bottle of wine because she's like, "You're going to need it tonight after this class." So anyway, I was drowning in craziness, and I brought all the kids in, and I said, "Hey guys, come here." I was like, "You see those parents over there?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, the way you guys are behaving right now, you're making me look really bad because you're not listening. Everybody's wiggling. So can you guys do me a favor for the rest of the class? Can you guys please make me look good by standing still, paying attention?" They're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." So they jump back in line. And then Hunter Johnson, who's now older now, but he was like spinning in line and his arms were waving. And Abby taps him on the shoulder and goes, "You're making Master Melody look bad." And it was one of those aha moments instead of me, trying to like threat, coerce, or punish or anything, it just made me realize that was what clicked with the kid is, "You're making me look bad." And kids, they want to make you look good. They want to have good discipline. All you have to do is explain it from the heart. So that was a great lesson that I learned from a 5-year-old is that just being honest and saying, "You guys are making me look bad, and will you help me make me look good," was like all that I needed. And I use it now in testings. I'm like, "I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to make you look good. Your job is to make your parents look good." And they love it. And then all of a sudden their mindset is, "I want to make my parents look good. I want to make Master Melody look good." And it works. It's a great little wisdom tip that I learned from Abby when she was 5.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it kind of links in massively to things that I've learned from you with regards to young children is there are certain stages in their development where they're perfectly keyed in to want to make those that they look up to, so be it their martial arts instructor or their parents, their grandparents, they want to make them look good. And so using that in classes to positively affect them, we've done that from yourself massively. But can you speak to that a little bit? So, because I was going to go into the other questions, but let's stay here. I love this stuff. This links directly into their stages of development. So at what age is that kind of stage, and how do we build around nurturing that kind of behavior?
So when they get out of the preschool stage of development, which is around 5 or 6 years old, where they've developed about 80% of their vocabulary and they're starting to develop interpersonal relationships, right? And 3 and 4-year-olds, they only have 30 to 40% of the vocabulary. So their communication is not really on point. So they don't really get verbal communication or nonverbal communication from their peers or with adults. By the time they're 5, they start to have this relationship. So they want to make you proud. So a perfect example, and I think you're teeing me up for this same story if you've heard me say it in my instructor certification, was one day where I told the kids, "Okay, everybody stand really strong like a dinosaur." And one of the kids raised their hand and said, "Dinosaur, I have a dinosaur coloring book at home." And then this other kid said, "Well, I have a dinosaur board game." And then one kid said, "I have dinosaur underwear." And next thing you know, all the kids are talking about dinosaurs. It has nothing to do with martial arts. And I remember back in the 90s, if a kid would interrupt me with that same similar mindset, I would give the kid push-ups for interrupting the class. But understanding the science and psychology behind when they're 5 and 6 years old, they want to make you proud. You're gonna get them to interrupt you, not because they're being disrespectful, but because they're trying to make you proud by saying, "I know about dinosaurs at home too." So what I say is, "I love dinosaurs. What's your favorite dinosaur?" "My favorite dinosaur is a T-Rex. I have a T-Rex statue on my desk." True story, I still do. "Who else likes the T-Rex? Raise your hand." "Okay, everybody stand really strong like a T-Rex." And then moving on. And what happens is that kid who interrupted me, if I would have given him push-ups, stimulate cortisol, that's where the barrier between kids and adults starts to be established, that, we don't get along and they don't get me and I don't get them, right? But me saying, "I love dinosaurs," and getting them all like dinosaurs, now all of a sudden he's like, "Oh my God, Master Melody loves dinosaurs. This is the greatest day ever." It changes everything just in that one split decision, and recognizing that, especially between the ages of 5 and 6, they want to make you proud. So some of the behaviors that normally look like distracting or disruptive behaviors are actually a sign of them trying to connect with you and make you proud. Like I said, make you look good.
Love it. It just reminded me, yes, you're right. I had heard that story before, but it's lovely to hear anyhow. I went and tested this because I was like, again, back in 2016, I heard this. I was like, does this really work, Rick? Because I was used to teach. I've been teaching kids since 2012, and I was teaching them in a slightly different way. So I went, and we had a new member came in, and they were wearing a Marvel T-shirt, and this was my ages 4 to 6 program, and they were a new prospect. They came and said, "Oh, Marvel T-shirt, I love it," and I kid you not. The following week, every child came in with a Marvel T-shirt underneath their regular uniform, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" The penny just dropped at that stage. It was fantastic.
Yeah,
Now,
it's so I have a quote that's coming out next week. It's into the timing, but here's the quote. It's very important to have a favorite color, food, kid movie, dinosaur, superhero, and animal, just in case it comes up in a conversation.
love that. Where's that
So
from? Is that from yourself?
that's from me. That's from me.
Awesome.
So favorite color, favorite food, favorite kid movie, favorite dinosaur, favorite superhero, favorite animal. So like little icebreakers that you need with new kids or connecting tips when kids are sad, you can sit down with them and change the subject. And what's your favorite color? Here's mine. What's your favorite food? And it works like a charm.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Again, this is why we're going to breeze through these questions because this is the nerdy stuff. I'm loving it. So thank you.
Yeah.
So next one, question number 2 is with the ongoing situation with online and remote learning, what positives and negatives do you feel our younger students have gained from that experience?
Well, obviously the negative, we'll just start there, is the lack of interpersonal or person-to-person connection. But I think that there's also the ability to connect with them via, our devices, which is the way of the future now, right? So a lot of people are to have remote jobs now. A lot of our seminars and so forth where people normally had to travel or doing via Zoom. So there's a lot of upsides to that. So children getting that experience with e-learning, I think there's a lot of value and a lot of benefit to that. But I'm the kind of person who looks at every situation and says, this is life as we know it. So let's figure out a way to help with their growth and development in a positive and productive way. So my son last year, they did go back to school even during the pandemic in kindergarten. They had to wear masks, but he had one situation in his class where one kid tested positive for COVID. So he had e-learning for a week. And watching the teacher, I just sat back there and I was like rocking back and forth going, if I was teaching right now, because all the kindergartners are sitting here on the computer, I would be like, okay, how's everybody doing today? Who's going to focus better, boys or girls? And of course, the girls would have been like, girls. And the boys were like, boys. Okay, now when I say go, let's see who can sit really still in their chair, and doing all these things to stimulate those same positive feelings, even though it was remote. I think that would have been very beneficial for school owners, and which is what we did for all of our skills schools. We created actual virtual teaching skills that the instructors were able to apply. And I think that was a really good experience from it. I think the other positive experience from it was the opportunity for us parents to connect with our children while during the lockdown. I'll never regret or I'll never look back and say, man, 2020 was an awful year, with the exception of the election that we had here in our country and
The
all of
less we
that
say about
dancing.
that.
Yeah, I know, right? But the fact that I had 7 tours I was supposed to do last year. I was supposed to go to Spain. I was supposed to go to Las Vegas, DC, New Orleans, all over. And I would have been gone from my son a lot. And with the shutdown, I was able to spend all this quality time with him at 5 years old, which is a very important time. And I hope that a lot of parents saw that as a benefit and as an upside, and were able to connect with the children and look back at those moments as precious moments.
Wonderful. And just to echo that, my son is 3, my daughter is 6, so they're going to be obviously 4 and 7 in February next year. And you're absolutely right. My son and I, in his early years, we struggled to connect. And with 2020, as tragic as it was for a lot of people, because we were able to spend that time together, we were able to find more of a connection, and our relationship is better than it's ever been. And I know that might sound silly because he's only 3, but I think sometimes we forget, especially as children grow up, how important those early years are for connection. So I think you're absolutely spot on there. Spending that time with our own children has been wonderful, especially when, like yourself, you'd be traveling all over the world. So
Yes,
much time
yes.
away.
And
Wonderful.
children are like your pets in some ways, where they're very resilient. if you're able to be positive about everything versus stressed out about everything. So for the listeners, if you're going to be going through another wave, be mindful that they'll get out of this just fine if you are fine. And it really starts with you as a parent, as a teacher, as a coach, and how you're handling the situation.
Very good point. And fourth and final, before we go into the nerdy stuff, if you could give one piece of advice to anybody who's about to teach their very first 4 to 6 year class, what would it be and why? It's been a while since I taught my first.
Well, to play. So 3 and 4 year olds. So 5 and 6 year olds build most of their confidence through making adults proud because they're connecting. 3 and 4 year olds build most of their confidence through play. So when you go out there, just they play with them. High fives too slow. Trickery. When I say go, everybody stand up. On your marks and say goose, go for a go kart. Asking them what their favorite dinosaur is, engaging with them on that. When you do the drills, anticipate that you're going to get kids who either don't listen, who run off the mat, mock each other, understanding their stage of development. So before you teach your first class, you really do want to dive into the stages of development, which we can do here in a second, to understand what to expect and what not to expect, so that, if a kid falls down and all the other kids fall down, that's part of, they're mocking each other. It's part of their stage of development. You're not going to get frustrated and say, I said sit still. Instead, be playful with it and say, okay, Johnny fell. Okay, let's all fall. Now let's all stand really strong. Now let's all fall again. If you can play with them, and I know for traditional school instructors who are so used to the disciplinary type, I understand and I get it, where you like that structure and that seriousness, but it's not realistic for the average child, especially the average child today. They need more of that play. They need more of that feel good, happy, fun feeling.
Because an instructor's role is to get the best out of their members and their
Yes.
students, and playing in that manner is going to want them to do well in that program, which is great. Because obviously back in the day, I started training 20 years ago, classes were very small and they were very tough. And we've seen a huge change in the industry since then. And I still think that the UK is a good 10 years behind America, which is why I'm reaching out to people like yourself, because we're doing better and we're always striving to do better, but there's a lot more that we can do. Because if you take a look at the two countries, you guys are miles ahead of where we are, which is wonderful, because it means that we have someone to learn from. So let's stay there then. In terms of the stages of development, let's stick with the young children. So typically in this country, we'll see a mixture of 3 to 6 or 4 to 6 classes. So we've cottoned on to the fact that they need to be separated, which is great. But I know from looking at your past material that there's even a huge gap between the 3-year-old and the 6-year-old that are often taught in the same class. So what would you, the best piece of advice, which I got a sneaky suspicion what it might be, but also what are the most distinct differences between these age groups?
Well, so really you have to understand them physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. So physically, 3-year olds are just now developing gross motor skills. So they're just learning how to hop with both feet together without falling. And they still don't have that muscular development. For example, if you ask a 3-year old to do arm circles, most of them are going to start circling from their elbows because their shoulder muscles aren't developed. Even just having them sit still like this with their legs crossed, hands on their knees, within 3 to 5 seconds, you're going to start to see them slunch over, and then eventually they're going to be rolling on the ground. And a lot of people think it's a disciplinary issue, and it's not. It's their core muscles are not developed to the point where they can sit still for more than 5 seconds without their muscles getting tired. It would be like me having another person my size sitting on my shoulders. After a few seconds, I would fall over. So understanding that difference between them and a 6-year-old, because a 6-year-old can do 5 crunches. A 3-year-old cannot do 1 crunch. Right? Is a 6-year-old can do maybe 2 good push-ups. A 3-year-old cannot do any push-ups. So understanding their physical stage of development is going to be extremely different. As a matter of fact, a 3-year-old can barely write their name, and they can't write it within a controlled space. A 6-year-old like my son can almost do cursive and stay in between the lines. So fine motor skill development, which means like when they punch, you're going to see difference. So a 3-year-old, when they hold their punch out, within 3 to 5 seconds, their arm's going to fall. 6-year-olds can hold it out for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, especially if they're motivated. 3-year-olds going to rest their high block on their head because their arms are tired. So that's just the physical, right? So then intellectually, 3-year-olds only have, so let me explain it this way. So I took 4 years of Spanish in high school. But if I went to Mexico and had dinner with a Mexican family and they are talking in Spanish, I would not be able to keep up. I would hear Negro Preo in a casa, and I'd be like, oh, the black dog, Paris dog, casa, house. I'd be like, the black dog went in the house. They're already on to the next conversation, right? A 6-year-old is going to understand this. So same thing, 3-year-olds only had 3 years of, in UK of English. So for example, if you have like a bunch of 3 and 6-year-olds sitting down and then you're like, okay, we're going to do some kicks. And you look at Johnny, you say, Johnny, stand up. You're going to demonstrate. Johnny, come over here. You're going to demonstrate this kick. And then you see all these kids get up and follow. And you're like, no, dum-dums, just Johnny. How come you can't pay attention? The 3-year-old is like me with the dog in the casa is going, I heard come with me and I see Johnny move. So I guess I need to go. Right. So the intellectual stage of development is not there either. So, and then of course you got your emotional and then your social stage of development where it's not like 3-year-olds are able to express their feelings and communicate and 6-year-olds can. So you're going to find the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds, if they're in the same class, really struggling to keep up, and not just them, but you're going to find the parents trying to compare the two, and that's just a recipe for disaster unless you know what you're doing. So if you don't have it in your schedule to split them, which I highly recommend, what you want to do is split them within class. So you want to say, okay, raise your hand if you're 3 years old or 4 years old, you're going to work right here. 5 and 6-year-olds, you're going to come over here, and then try to modify the drill according to their physical, intellectual, emotional, and social stage of development. It is not easy to do, but it's easier to do that and keep them raving fans than it is to constantly just try to market and, have this churn rate mostly from your younger kids because they can't keep up. And then the older kids, because they're losing interest because you got younger kids in class. You're always going to have that factor unless you really dive into studying the stage of the development and then teaching according to their age, which again, it's not simple. It's easy to do once you know what you're doing, but it's not simple to go through the process of being an expert at it. But once you get there, then it's a great experience.
We also find that managing the parents' expectations will keep the children in, because if the youngsters want to quit, because, for them, it might be an entertainment thing, they're not entertained, they're not enjoying it. And all the parents are seeing is an instructor at the front of the class who's struggling to keep their 3-year-old calm and sat properly when the 6-year-old is doing really, really well. And so they start comparing, as you mentioned.
Yes.
But you go so far as to start to educate the parents as well, don't you? Now,
Yes.
we do that a little bit. So when I'm addressing the children, I'll also address the parents to manage their expectations. So I'll say, okay, cool. Everybody sit in number 10, which is arms and legs crossed. And then I'll go to the parents to say, by the way, if you see them slouching a little bit, they're 3 years old. That's to be expected. So we'll educate the parents as we go. How do you go about educating the parents and managing their expectations?
Well, yeah, exactly. So there's multiple ways that you can do it, right? And so you want to utilize every arsenal that you have. So adding on to that. So for example, if you have a 3-year-old who can sit still for more than 5 seconds, looking over at the parent and saying, Mom, look at Johnny sitting still for more than 5 seconds. Listen, that's not part of his stage of development. His core muscle isn't really developed yet. So to see him sit still like that means that he's above his physical stage of development for his core muscles. So you see how I'm really getting detailed. So utilizing that type of verbiage in class, or look at Johnny, he's holding his punch out, he's not dropping it. Oh my gosh, what 3 and 4-year-old can hold his arm out for 10 seconds like that? That's incredible. He's above his physical stage of development for his upper body muscles. So using that type of enthusiasm is great. It also starts with the initial contact. So every single student who goes through our skills program has to be pre-evaluated. So we have age-specific pre-evaluations for 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 9, 10 to 14-year-olds. They come in for their pre-evaluation, which is free. The instructor runs them through the 8 skills and then scores them on a scale of 1 to 5, 4 or 5 meaning it's above their stage of development. 3 is where they should be. 1 or 2 means that they have a lot of room for growth in that particular area. So then after you run them through the pre-evaluation, sharing it with the parents, going over each one, now all of a sudden you position yourself as a child development expert. Now you can help manage their expectations because they're seeing it firsthand that you know what you're doing. So pre-evaluations, using it constantly in class. And then of course, now that we have social media and email and so forth, sending out information and content on a regular basis, whether it's quotes, it's blogs. We have a parent skills program that's 8 different parent skills with blogs and quotes and at-home assessments and at-home tasks and so forth. So that's a great way to position yourself. And of course, you want to make sure that you're highly educated in it, though. You can't just say, you know, I'm a child development expert without putting in the work, reading the books, taking online courses. We just launched this new program called the Certified Pediatric Ninja Specialist Program last year. It's 8 courses. It's a whole year process. They go through neurotransmitter stages of development, parent skills, teaching skills, disabilities, theories of motivation, learning styles. You know, so anybody who goes through the CPNS program, we even have parents, teachers, and child psychologists who've looked at it and said, this is not, I didn't even get this in college. So it's on point. So the more you invest in your own knowledge and education and your team's knowledge and education, the smarter they're going to be, the more validated they're going to be when they give this feedback to parents. And then it gets to the point where you've established this reputation where parents aren't going to question your knowledge. They're going to see it firsthand in what you're doing, and they're hearing it and they're experiencing it. And that's when you position yourself out of a martial arts school and out of competing with other martial arts schools, and you start competing with child therapists. As a matter of fact, during the pandemic, we changed Skills brand from Skills Dynamic Martial Arts Training to Skills Personal Development Center, or Skills Child Development Center if you're just doing children. And we had multiple schools that were able to reopen during the pandemic because they weren't a gym, fitness, or sports facility. They were a necessity because it's child development. We actually had a senator in Minnesota was the first one to do it with Tim Flynn. And so now that's what Skills is we're really trying to say, we're not competing with martial arts schools. We're not competing with soccer, football. We're competing with therapists, occupational therapists, those type of people, because our team is trained at that level and the results are at that level, but for a lot less money than therapy.
Yeah, that's for sure. The amount of times I've gone to martial arts and felt so much better because I've been able to do that there cost me an absolute fortune in therapy. And I think that's a really important note, because a lot of us here in the UK, especially with the winter coming, there's already talk of up north of councils advising, not yet making it a rule, but advising that schools close their after school clubs, which a lot of martial arts clubs are after school facilities. And obviously a lot of us are still teaching from halls and gyms and all that sort of thing. So we fall squarely under that bracket of an extracurricular activity as opposed to something that is vital in the society. And I think that's where we need to position ourselves much better in the United Kingdom. Is like we still see ourselves largely as a club, even though a lot of us have gone full time. Which is, you know, something that sorely needs to change. Now, fast forwarding in terms of development a little bit, something that I really wanted to touch on, because I think it's something that lots of us still struggle with, because a lot of us have seen the benefits to these younger programs, and a lot of us now have moved away from not teaching children. I mean, back when I was first starting, I couldn't find a school that would teach you if you're under the age of 14. And I think that was largely because they didn't know how. Whereas almost everybody has children's clubs now. However, teen years, still a big struggle. So it's kind of A, keeping them motivated, B, trying to attract teens to something that might not seem cool or, you know, something that they want to do anymore. So in terms of their cognition and what they're going through, their development, what are the best ways that we can look at to keep teens motivated and remotivate them as well?
Well, again, it goes back to understanding their stage of development, right? So intellectually, when you become a preteen is when your adolescent brain is starting to grow and shape into an adult brain. So when that happens, you have where the area of the brain that needs growth needs energy. Right. And what happens in the brain is that it sucks energy from certain parts of the brain and then enhances energy in other parts of the brain that help that area grow. And then it goes to the next part and so forth. And it starts at the back of the brain, which is where your hippocampus is. So preteens and teens, their hippocampus has all this energy now going back there. And that part of the brain is responsible for knowledge and intellect, the algebra, the chemistry, the geometry, all the, the amazing facts. That's why they have this global franchise called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Because there's like all this information that they're really enhancing. That's how they're becoming an adult. But the downfall to that is that all the energy is being sucked from the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain, which is all your executive decision making, your common sense is coming from. So parents are looking at their kids and going, why did you eat that Tide Pod and put it on Snapchat? And talking to you like a bonehead, right? And because they make a lot of bonehead choices like that. And then they're looking at you going, do my homework. And they're right. Can you do their homework?
No chance.
Probably not, right? So having a ridiculous amount of respect for their intellectual capabilities as far as remembering facts and so forth, but also understanding that their executive functioning is not there. So when they make bonehead choices, I'm like, look, I get it. I know you're highly smart. You made a bad choice. Your adolescent brain is growing into an adult brain. This is where, I learned mostly from my wrong things. I got kicked out. I got almost expelled from school by spraying pepper spray in the cafeteria when I was 16 because my parents gave me a car and on the keychain was the pepper spray. And I was like, hey, look at this. Psh! And I cleared the cafeteria and sent 2 people to the hospital and I was getting expelled. That's how I got my job at Disney, but that's a whole nother story. Because they were hiring and I was in the office getting expelled. And I ended up talking the manager into a job. Anyway, bonehead choices. And so respecting their intellectual stage of development, their physical stage of development. So their body is also transitioning from an adolescent body to an adult body. So there's hormones like crazy. One doctor said that a preteen's body is going through as if you were taking a fitness class for 4 to 6 hours per day, a nonstop fitness class. So they're physically exhausted. So that's why when you're like, Johnny, take out the laundry or go take out the garbage, and he's on the couch and he's slow to get up and he's moaning and groaning. And you're like, dude, I just taught 5 martial arts back-to-back classes and you can't take out the friggin' garbage? What's wrong with you, man? Right? They're physically exhausted. Now let's get into this emotional stage of development. Because their hormones are all over the place and they're accelerating their growth, they are highly emotional and highly sensitive to any type of stimulation, both good and also bad. That's why a lot of times they'll just shut down and shelter because they can't handle anything more, even good experiences. I was working in a parent group this morning with a mom who said, nothing will motivate my 15-year-old daughter. I try to offer her to buy her stuff, take her shopping, and there are just some days she doesn't want to do anything. And I explained to her that she's shut down. She's emotionally exhausted. Her willpower is exhausted for the day. Her bucket is empty. So she doesn't even want to do anything that makes her feel good because she just doesn't want to feel anything more because she's felt to her maximum capacity for the day. Just understanding that will help you approach her with a more compassionate and empathetic mindset of, you're probably emotionally drained for the day. The last thing you want to do is anything fun, anything at all. You just want your brain to shut down. So let me know if you want me to light some candles, turn on some music, make you some tea. You guys have tea over there, whatever to help you just emotionally reset and recharge. Getting that and understanding that goes a long way. And then, of course, there's social stage of development. Not only are they going through this physical, intellectual, and emotional changes, but also their body's changing and their feelings are changing towards other people. So the social part of their stage of development is even the worst part because they're gossiping about each other, they're falling in love with other people, and they're all over this emotional and social roller coaster. So having knowledge in all of these areas, it opens you up to approaching them very differently when they come into the class. And we have a very successful team program here at On the Mat. One of the reasons why is because when they walk in, they feel safe. They feel understood. They know that we get them. They come in, we're not like, take off your shoes, get ready to exercise. We're not propaganding them. Like, you guys ready to have fun today? That's for the younger kids. We're like, how you doing today? How was your day? Let's get on the mat. Let's start working out. Let's stimulate those endorphins and get that body moving is exactly what you need to kind of help self-regulate yourself. And just, even instead of saying, okay, we need to work on our form for 15 minutes, guys, saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're working on our forms for 15 minutes and you get to pick how you want to do your form for the first 5 minutes. You can do it with weights. You can do it slow motion. You can do it backwards. You can do it progressive. You pick. Now all of a sudden they're choosing how they want to do it. So they're more intrinsically motivated. And then 5 minutes by, okay, now pick a different way. Do your form backwards in slow motions with weights, so progressive. Great. 5 minutes goes by, you want to pick another one. And what that does is engaging them in choices helps them empower them to put in the effort. And then what happens is while they're doing their form, they're stimulating endorphins. They're stimulating this dopamine because I can't wait to do my form backwards next. They're stimulating the serotonin because they're satisfied that they just did their form for that long. The endorphins of, I just said endorphins again, the oxytocin of you going, oh, wow, you did your form backwards. That was really good. It's hard to do, right? It's not easy. Give me high fives. Now, all of a sudden, all these chemicals in their brain are starting to override all the hormones and the cortisol and everything that's happened prior to them coming to your class. And that sets up the perfect formula for them going, I can't wait to come back. This is my safe space. This is my number 3, right?
Absolutely fantastic. Because we've got many teens, and trying to keep them motivated has been a struggle, and we're doing a good job, but we can always do better. And that is absolute gold. So I really appreciate it. Now, I am very conscious of your time. You've been incredibly generous with it already. So I do have one final question. Obviously, with things like lockdowns and pandemics and all that kind of easing and coming to an end, you are a massive live music and golf fan. So how much time have you finally managed to get out there and get back on the green and get into live musics?
Yes, yeah. So once a week golfing, and geez, live music. Just in the past month, I've seen Chris Stapleton, Zach Brown Band. We went to Austin for the Austin City Limits Festival. This past weekend, we had Reggae Rise Up with Dirty Heads and Stephen Marley. We went to the Pig gig and saw Darius Rucker and Judah and the Lion. We have Erica Badu on Friday. Then we have the next big thing with 21 Pilots and AJR. So yeah, we're live music. I mean, that's our soul. So we go out anytime there's a concert here, we're there. And even when we travel, that's what we do, is we try to go find live music. Because again, I'm all about the chemicals in my brain and feeling good. So quite often, to answer your question, although a lot right now, I think I've reached my limit for a little bit. So I don't mind teetering back, but at least once or twice a month.
Absolutely
live music.
Awesome. Love it. No, Melody Johnson, thank you so much for your time.
You're
Has
welcome.
been an absolute pleasure. And just to very quickly say that there are a lot of questions that were sent to us from our listeners with regards to ASD and neurodivergency in children, and we've decided to save those for another time.
Yes.
I'm not going to commit you to it, but you might be able to bring someone on who is
He's
your
on
expert in that.
Yeah, he's on it. So Clayton Maxey, who is he started with me when he was 8. He's a partner now at On the Mat Martial Arts. Yes, yeah, he co-coaches my son's flag football team with me. He wrote our program called Spectrum Skills. It was part of his mastership project. He had to do a dissertation on it. And it would do him a disservice for me to try to answer your questions when he's the one, again, working on my business. I was able to, as this particular area became a highly demanded area, which obviously we know from the questions that you have, instead of me having to put in the work, he was working in the school with children on the spectrum. So he actually created the entire program, and he's the expert at it. So he's going to have more passion, more knowledge, more experience. So we'll get him on the podcast to answer all those questions for you guys.
I wasn't even going to drop him in it, but I appreciate it. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Melody, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Have
Appreciate
a
it. That was a good
wonderful
time.
day.
Yes, sir. Thank you.